안녕하세요. 제 이름은 이재훈입니다. 오늘 여러분들을 만나게 되어서 반갑습니다. 죄송합니다만 미국에서 태어나서 한국말이 서툴어서 영어로 하도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다. I almost didn't attempt to do that after hearing David, but I had to give it a try. Everyone, it's a pleasure to meet you guys. My name is John Yee. I am a managing director at Gateway Group. We are a full-service investor relations and public relations firm based in Newport Beach, California. Gateway as a whole has been in business for over 26 years, working with emerging growth or microcap or small cap companies across sectors. So we help clients build brands, tell their story, and navigate the capital markets. I think that's a little messed up, but in terms of our experience, we have had a lot of experience working with Asian companies. We're based in the US, but have worked with a couple of Korean companies in Double Down and Capdivision, and have a pretty robust Singapore and Japan practice. So what is investor relations? So investor relations is the gateway, quote unquote, for transparent communications for anyone that deals with a company, whether that be investors, stakeholders, employees, or shareholders. And it's a very pivotal practice or a program that every company needs to install in order to succeed in the capital markets. In terms of the recipes for success, or let's just go a layer deeper for a successful IR campaign. In terms of the audience, who do we necessarily interact with? Obviously, the clients are the companies, the CEOs and the CFOs, but on the other side are investors, institutional and retail investors, and analysts. So these are the people that you guys as a publicly traded company will interface with, interact with, and obviously tell your story to. The main objective for IR is really to break down the narrative, the corporate narrative, into bite-sized pieces for investors, analysts, and shareholders to digest, because most corporate stories aren't the easiest to understand right off the bat. And again, we work with so many good companies, great operators, great CEOs, but they're not the best storytellers. So we are consultants that help break that down and ensure that the company is speaking the same language as investors. So what exactly is being spoken? The content and communications, right? Financial data, earnings reports, investor presentations, and any other collateral that is investor-facing or public-facing. Our team will work with the CEO, the CFO, to ensure that everything is online, on brand, and A-plus material to go. In terms of the regulatory requirements, we work pretty hand-in-hand with the law firms, SEC counsel, to ensure that the company is within the guardrails of the SEC regulations and isn't breaking any regulation fair disclosure or Reg FD. That basically means the company is not allowed to share any MNPI or material non-public information, because as a public company, you're under the microscope of the SEC, whereas you're not for a private company. And metrics of success, it's capital markets awareness, investor engagement, analyst coverage, and the accuracy of financial communications. So this is a slide that I wanted to emphasize, and it's the importance of corporate communications. So as a company, you need to be able to tell your story to the right audience, whether it be on the investor relations side or the public relations side. On the IR side, your main audience are the investors, buy-side guys, analysts, whereas for the public relations side of things, it's media, consumer, and employees. We call it the left hand and the right hand, and they need to be able to be on the same page, or else the company doesn't look cohesive and isn't telling the right equity story. So what exactly does investor relations do in the pre-IPO landscape? We kind of bucketed here into a couple of phases. The first one is strategy development. Our team gets on a call with the management team once we are engaged. We'll help align on the strategy. What's the timeline? Who are the bankers? Who are the accountants? Who's the law firm? So we want to ensure that we're on the same page and have a strategy for the broader IPO timeline. And we'll help by start building the business description, because again, the company knows what they're doing from an operational standpoint, but how are they telling that story to the public? We help with that process. And that kind of bleeds into the second phase, which is profile raising and preparation. Presumably, there are going to be companies of yours that are in the same ecosystem, your competitors, quote unquote, that are already publicly traded. So as an IR firm, it's our job to see, who are those other competitors out there? How do they present their story? What are the KPIs that they're telling? So we want to ensure that you're telling your story in the right manner, in the best possible manner, so to speak, possible, and then we'll help create some of the collateral materials, namely the investor deck, the one sheet. The investor deck is going to be the most important piece of information that you need to work on as a company, because that is what the CEO, the CFO, whoever the spokesperson is for the company is going to be walking investors through during the roadshow process, which is what the bankers will typically help facilitate. And social media is another element where I will go deeper into a little bit later, but in this social media prevalent environment, everyone, investors, retail, institutional, they're all looking at social media. What does the company do? How do they disseminate news? What are some updates that they provided to the public? It's an absolute vital part of the go public process. And shifting gears to the third phase, in terms of IPO liftoff, once all the collateral materials are finalized, the deck is good to go, the one sheet's good to go, we're gonna start the roadshow rehearsal or the mock pitch process. Now, again, our goal is as consultants to help you as the management team tell the best story possible. We want you to be ready for game time, which is the roadshow process in advance of an IPO. So our team will hop on a call and have several mock pitches with the clients. We will play the investor role, you guys will play the spokesperson for the company, and we want to ensure that you are telling the best story, and we'll even throw questions out there because investors are savvy individuals. They look at the numbers, they know what questions to ask, and we know what questions they're going to be asking you. So we want to ensure that you guys are as well equipped and well prepared as possible. And once that's finalized, we want to ensure everything else from an IR infrastructure standpoint, namely the investor relations website, is finalized, ready to go prior to the D-Day timeframe. And looking on ahead, a key point to note is from an IR standpoint, a lot of what we do is heavily emphasized in the post-IPO window. There is a fair amount of work that's done in the pre-IPO phase, as you can see, but post-IPO is really when investor relations is fully activated because your stock's publicly traded. It doesn't stop. It's open when the market's open, and that's really when IR is a pivotal play, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. And finally, it's being public. So these wonderful people here, the Avengers, as I call them, are going to be helping you throughout the entire process of going public. And once your stock is priced, it closes, boom, you're off to the races, and you're a publicly traded company. So that's really how we think about it and how we're helpful in the pre-IPO landscape. So what is the role of IR in the post-IPO phase? We kind of bucket it into 4 different segments: consulting, communication, outreach, and reporting. So from a consulting standpoint, presumably a lot of the individuals here, given the Korean ecosystem, have not been Nasdaq or NYSE CEOs or CFOs before. We want to be the partner right next to you to kind of coach you, walk you through what you should be doing in the capital markets. The capital markets is a daunting game once you're public. There's a lot of work, like everyone's discussed in the pre-IPO phase, but once you're public, that's some will say it's really when the game begins, because again, your stock's liquid, people are trading your stock, and everyone has eyeballs on your story. So we help from a consulting standpoint by helping with corporate positioning, perception studies, M&A communication strategies if applicable, capital formation, and crisis comms, and other strategic counsel. Moving on, the communications bucket is very, very important. And the investor presentation and the investor website are 2, we call it living documents. As your business progresses, as you grow, as you have new milestones, as you double your revenues next quarter, your investor presentation and your corporate narrative is going to shift. So those are documents, and the presentation and the website are things that we monitor and help by ensuring that the public is fully apprised of what you are up to as a company. What did you do well? What is going on now? And what's exciting? What's the future looking like? And that's all going to be told in the investor presentation, presumably, and then the website as well. Press releases, that's the main medium of communication that companies use to disseminate news, to educate the folks and alert folks of certain announcements, partnerships, wins. So we draft and work with the management team to, again, craft that equity story. And earnings calls. Every publicly traded company has to report earnings. FPIs typically report twice. We will help with the earnings call process. So once the filings are all ready, once the financials are fully baked, we will sit on a call with the management team and kind of figure out what kind of story do we want to tell the public? How do we want to frame ourselves given what's already what's live in terms of financials? So that's something that we help out with. And moving on, in terms of outreach, this is one area that is absolutely vital for a publicly traded company in the microcap and small cap ecosystem. Just because you're public doesn't mean everyone's going to be flocking towards your stock and you're the next Amazon or the next Tesla. That's typically not the case unless you're a unicorn. But outreach is a very pivotal component of IR because you want to get your story out there to the right institutional investors. And that's something that our firm specializes in targeting the right sell-side equity research analysts, targeting the right hedge fund, the right mutual fund. And one thing that our firm has that other IR firms don't is an investor conference. We actually just had a very successful event at the Four Seasons Hotel in San Francisco. And it's a conference, it's a marketing event for companies to be able to market their stock, tell investors about their story, and to basically evangelize their corporate story into Wall Street. And then finally, reporting. So what are shareholders doing? Who's buying your stock? Who's filing the 13Gs, the 13Fs? And investor marketing feedback and perceptions. The benefit of working with a third party like us is investors are very candid. Typically, they won't tell the CEO up front, hey, this sucks, this isn't great, but then they'll be very candid with us. And we can garner that feedback and help fold and shape the corporate narrative accordingly if the investor thinks this is good, this is bad. It's very good feedback and very good information for management teams to digest. In terms of the corporate and IR website, this is something that our firm offers to a lot of our clients because the IR website is something that typically isn't known to be had until kind of later in the game as you approach the IPO timeframe, but an IR website is very necessary in addition to a corporate site. And I mentioned corporate site because as someone who's worked with several foreign private issuers, it's sometimes hard to find a certain company on Google. And investors in the US are always going to Google ABC company, XYZ company. But if you're not being searched from an SEO standpoint and your corporate website isn't available, it's kind of a turnoff for investors. So it's absolutely vital that you have a very tier 1, A+ corporate website and an investor relations website. And the IR site is a sub-tab within the corporate website that a lot of investors are trained to go to because there's all the sub-tabs within the IR site that is necessary for companies to include, such as disclosures, press releases, all that stuff. So that's something that we help kind of navigate you guys through. Yep. In regards to social media, like I mentioned, given the environment that we're currently in, social media is extremely vital. We hear investor feedback all the time if a company doesn't update its social media on a regular basis. Because again, if I'm going to search an ABC company on LinkedIn and they haven't posted in the past 3 years, it's going to raise an eyebrow. I'm going to be a little bit confused and question why aren't they so active in the social media landscape. So especially as a foreign private issuer, given that your business isn't necessarily in the US at all times, it's very important to have a social media presence at the very least. So this is an interesting slide that I really wanted to kind of hone in on. So some insights into the US IPO markets given our experience. First on the left side, what investors look for in foreign private issuers. They look for industry leaders with strong market share or unique advantages. They want to know, this is actually a really important point, currently operating or plans to expand operations into the US. Not to deter anyone away, but I would strongly recommend having a definitive plan to expand or already have a presence in the States if you intend to list in the US. That is by far the #1 feedback that we get from investors if a company that is Nasdaq listed, NYSE listed, but they're based in Singapore. Sometimes raises an eyebrow, but it's one of the main points because investors want to touch, taste, feel, see, smell your product or service. Net income positive, this is still somewhat of a trend. It's ideal to have net income positive bottom line or a clear path towards profitability and a strong management team. This is another point I really want to emphasize because I've been on client calls where there's no English-speaking individual from the C-suite. And that 30-minute call ends up being an hour. And you can imagine investors aren't the most patient individuals. So as a result, it's absolutely pivotal to have a spokesperson, whether it's the VP of finance, whether it's the COO. It doesn't have to always be the CEO or the CFO, but someone with public company experience that can actually speak fluent English is going to be absolutely important in actually echoing and evangelizing your story to investors. Lastly, reporting financials on a quarterly basis rather than a biannual basis. This is just another piece of feedback that we get from investors because they want to know what's happening in your business, right? And foreign private issuers typically will report earnings twice a year versus domestic filers, which are 4 times a year. And moving to the right, these are some FAQs that investors ask. So why is the company going public now? Why go public in the US when operations are mainly in Asia? What was the reasoning behind going public in the US markets? Is any part of your workforce in the US? Why should I invest my capital now? Which companies are considered your competitors here in the US? And how will an IPO accelerate the company's overarching corporate goals? So these are some FAQs that we typically hear from investors. Lastly, we offer a complimentary consultation. I have a little booth back there, and I'll be around for the next hour or two after we conclude here. So I'd love to speak and meet with anyone if you guys have any questions. But thank you so much for the time. 감사합니다.